Hello, everybody. This is Yoko's Anime Reactions. Now let us continue. One of my nephews is sleeping, and I'm hoping the other will be too, soon. Okay, here we go. Part 7 of Ascendance of a Bookworm. Stone Slate Get. The most important thing to prepare for winter was food. Unlike Japan, there weren't supermarkets open every day of every year. Barely any crops could be grown or harvested, and the market would barely open due to the weather. If you didn't want to starve to death, you had to prepare ahead of time, which is why I was currently sitting inside the back of a covered wagon between the loads of stuff packed into it. It all started when Dad woke us all up at the crack of dawn. Alright, we're going to the farm today. Everybody ready? No, of course not. What the heck's going on? I rubbed my sleepy eyes and glared at Dad, but Mom and Tuli both nodded enthusiastically with big, happy smiles. I was the only one not understanding. Oh, right, mine was sick when this was decided, or she might not have heard about it. Mom clapped her hands together, and both Tuli and Dad nodded in agreement. It felt like I was being left out and excluded from the rest of the family, which didn't feel great. I pouted a little, cheeks puffing out, but everyone started preparing immediately. They didn't seem to have the time to worry about me. Anyway, we need to keep warm. I remember you getting a fever last year, mine. Mom called out to me while carrying stuff down the steps. I was in the middle of changing clothes, since given that they wouldn't let me stay home alone, I had no choice but to go along with them. Why are we going to a farm in a far-off village anyway? I had intended to walk at least part of the way to the village, but in order to build up strength, but I was so excessively slow that Dad got frustrated and put me in the wagon. Sorry, hang on. There really wasn't any space for me, so I huddled into as small of a ball as possible. In the wagon, there were several barrels of varying size, plenty of empty bottles, string, cloth, salt, and wood. It was all important stuff for what we were doing at the farm, probably. Wait, am I the most useless thing in this wagon? Oh God, probably. Dad was pulling the wagon from the front while Mom and Tuli pushed it from the back. It kind of felt like I was being serious dead weight, which again made me feel bad. Mom, why are we going to a farm? There's no smokery in the city, remember? We're going to rent the one in the nearest farming village. We're going to smoke meat? That reminds me, we bought lots of meat in the market. But I feel like she already boiled or salted most of it. There's that much left? Shouldn't it be bad by now? Is this okay? I started counting the days on my fingers, worried, but Mom just looked at me with exasperation. What are you even talking about? Today's pig day. We'll buy 2 pigs at the farm, split into groups to prepare them, and then share the meat. What? For an instant, my ears blocked what they had said. What Mom had said. There was a brief but clear time lag between me hearing that and the noise reaching my brain, and when it did, I started to tremble. Pig day? What? A day when we and our neighbors gather together, butcher a pig, salt it, smoke it, and make bacon, sausage, and all other sorts of meat. Goodness mine, don't you remember last year? Actually, you got a fever on the cart on the way there. Honestly, I want to get a fever this year too. At least then I won't have to watch it happen. Mom, didn't you buy a lot of meat in the market a bit ago? You should know that wouldn't be enough. In fact, that was just extra meat to supplement the pig. I had thought she bought more than enough meat before, but apparently it was all just extra meat, not even the main event. I couldn't even imagine just how much meat was necessary to last the winter. In sharp contrast to my depression over being unable to avoid seeing pigs get butchered, Tuli was wearing a bright, full smile as she pushed the cart. There's lots of fun stuff about today. We get to taste the meat in the middle of it, and there's fresh sausage for dinner, too. It's great. This is the first time you'll be helping mine, but it's kind of like a festival everyone gets excited for. I'm glad we get to go together this year. Go away! Everyone? I blinked in confusion, and Mom replied with an expression that practically said, "Don't ask questions with such obvious answers." Who would we do it with if not our neighbors? Butchering pigs is a serious job. It can't be done without at least 10 adults. Ugh, our neighbors. Mine had a lot of vague memories, so there were definitely going to be a bunch of people who knew me that I didn't know. Not only would dealing with them be a pain, but we were going to be butchering a pig on top of that. Just remembering what I saw at the market was enough to make a chill run down my back. I don't want to go. What are you talking about? We won't have any sausage or bacon all winter if we don't go. We needed the meat for the winter, so naturally they wouldn't turn around even if I said I didn't want to go. I had to participate no matter how little I wanted to. I sighed depressed, and soon our cart reached the southern gate of the outer wall. Wait, Captain, aren't you late? Everyone else passed through a long time ago. Yeah, I figured. One of Dad's co-workers called out to him as we passed through the gate. Apparently our neighbors had left for the farm a long time ago. Stay safe. A younger-looking guy who looked like he probably liked children waved at me, so I waved back. Polite decency was important in all things. Wow. The moment our cart rumbled out of the small tunnel that was the southern gate, I let out a tiny cry of surprise. It was the first time I had left the city walls since becoming mine. To be honest, I hadn't expected things to be so different outside. First of all, there were no buildings. Inside the city was a tight, never-ending cluster of buildings. But the second we got outside the gate, there was a wide road with only about 10 to 15 shacks strewn about. On top of that, the air was nice. The more open the air, the more the smell of waste was diluted. I supposed, and for the first time in a long while, I remembered the air could taste good. There were no tall walls to block out the smells inside. I looked around and saw a field of crops on one side of me and a forest of tall trees on the other. The scenery was impossibly tranquil, the very definition of idyllic. Mine, close your mouth, you're gonna bite your tongue off. What? Right after Dad's warning, the cart began rustling up and down even worse than it did in town. The city road had shifted from cobblestone to a normal dirt road with mounds and hills. It was shaking so hard I thought all our stuff would fall out, but at least they had ropes holding them down. I was in the most danger at all since I wasn't locked down whatsoever. I clung tightly to the side of the cart for my own safety. This kind of road is the worst. On sunny days they're super bumpy, and on rainy days they're a muddy mess. Learn how to make asphalt already! I spat angry complaints on the inside and soon felt Dad speed up. We had arrived at the village. It was about 15 minutes away from the town gate, and after passing through the entryway I could hear lots of people talking. Almost there. Butchering the pig was mainly a job for men. They had to hold down beasts that looked like they weighed over 100 kilograms, not to mention tie them up and hang them from their feet. It was a job that took a lot of strength. While they were doing that, the women would prepare the smokery, boil lots of water, and prepare salt and tools for preservation. By the time we reached the village, the butchering was already beginning. Those who didn't participate naturally didn't get any meat. Crap, it's starting. Ava, Thule, hurry and take your places. Oh no, run, Thule! Right. All three of them let go of the cart, grabbed wax-coated aprons made from some thick materials, and put them on. Once Mom and Dad Thule got theirs on, they rushed over to the smokery where a bunch of women already were. Dad put on his apron too and ran off toward after grabbing a spear, which was probably an important tool here. What? Everyone's so fast! My family had all run off before I could even process what was happening. I could have run after Mom, but I wouldn't want to be standing around a crowd with no idea of what to do. It was a yearly ritual for these people, so there were probably a ton of unspoken rules. If only I had a manual. Knowing that I would just get in the way no matter what I did, I decided to wait in the cart until someone called for me. This was important work too, I told myself while sitting on top of the abandoned cart doing nothing in particular. Unfortunately, however, Dad left the cart right in the middle of the pig slaughtering field. There was a little distance between us, but I could clearly see this pig squealing in pain and fear while running away from its pursuers. There was a wooden stake driven into the ground, connected by rope to the pig's right hind leg. It fled in a circle around the stake while men chased after it, desperately to pin it down. I saw a familiar pink head in the crowd. Ralph and Lutz were definitely around here somewhere. Go get him! Ha! Screaming out battle cries, Dad participated in the chaos. He readied the spear with immense speed and then stabbed it right into the pig. That single strike was enough for the pig to start convulsing, legs twitching before it stopped moving entirely. I let out a tiny shriek, but all the men let out a cheer at what had been done. Mom rushed forward with a metal bucket-looking thing and a somewhat long stick. Another woman brought a bowl thing to the pig, and a moment later, blood sprayed everywhere, dyeing several people's aprons dark red. Dad had probably pulled the spear out from after the blood-gathering bucket and bowl were prepared. What did they do with the blood? Did they just get rid of it? Or did they use that too? I covered my mouth and felt myself shake with terror. I couldn't see the pig due to all the women's aprons crowding around, but I could see how Mechanically, the women were gathering blood in the bowl and pouring it into the bucket. Mom furrowed her brows a little while, firmly stirring all the blood being poured into her bucket. Mom looks really scary right now. I'm guessing they're going to be using the blood. I just don't know in what. Ugh. Afterward, a bunch of people worked together to hang the pig upside down from a tree that had been prepared beforehand. The blood they hadn't managed to squeeze out of the pig began dripping down to the ground. The real butchering was about to begin. A man with a thick butcher knife walked up and pressed it against the pig's stomach. That was the last thing I remembered. Before I knew it, I was in a stone building, not one I had seen in the village. I could see the ceiling since someone had laid me on my back, but it wasn't my home ceiling. I blinked several times, still on my back, and then remembered what I had seen before passing out. It made me sick. But for some reason, something felt really familiar about the pig being butchered. What was it? Like something being hung upside down and then being cut apart. It was on the tip of my tongue, but just wouldn't come out. If I had to guess, it wasn't one of mine's memories. It was one of my Urano memories. I must have seen something similar in Japan. It looked like that fish I saw being hung upside down in a coastal Ibaraki market. From that perspective, I could understand why everyone was so excited about the pig. I remembered how excited people were to eat a fish that fresh. Well, I can understand, but it's still a bit emotionally rough for me. I mean, the fish didn't scream in pain like that. It didn't gush out blood. Ugh, so gross. I rolled over, holding my mouth, and felt right off what I was laying on. Ow. I used my hands to stand up and looked around, seeing immediately that I had been resting on a smallish wooden bench. There was a burning fireplace nearby, so it wasn't cold. But nobody was around, and I couldn't hear anybody talking. Oh, right. Where am I anyway? The moment I decided I needed to figure out where I was, a soldier peeked into the room, maybe due to having heard me fall. Oh, finally awake, huh? Mr. Otto? I let out a sigh of relief, glad to see someone I knew. A stone building with Otto inside could only mean that I was in one of the gate's waiting rooms. My anxiety melted away after I learned where I was. That means you remember me, right? Otto looked visibly relieved that I remembered him. That made sense. I was a child on the outside, after all. He definitely thought that I would have started crying if I'd seen someone I didn't know. I can never forget you. I mean, you're the first man of culture I've met in this world, and my future teacher. How could I forget? I mimicked the chest-tapping salute, to which Otto laughed a little and rubbed my head. The captain rushed back here with you in tow. He said you collapsed in the cart. He'll be back as soon as he finished with what he needs to do. I didn't know how long it would take to butcher a pig, but they had to prepare the meat afterward, too, so I couldn't imagine it would be over soon. Thinking about it, Dad said we would get fresh meat for dinner. Guess I'll be waiting here for a while. Knowing that I would end up with plenty of spare time, I had put the materials I needed for faux potpourri into the cart, but they were out of my reach. What's wrong, Mine? Feeling lonely without your mom and dad? No, I was just thinking about how I could kill some time. I shook my head and said what I was really thinking. Otto looked at me hard for a bit, then whispered, he did say she wasn't as young as she looked, and nodded to her. Yeah, definitely. I might have something that can help, Mine. How about this? Wow, the slate? Otto held out the slate. He knew for sure we'd be passing by the gate today, so he had brought it with him to give to me. A man of culture that considered about other people. Mr. Otto's such a great person. I need to go back and stand at the gate, but go ahead and practice this while I'm gone. Otto wrote my name, Mine, at the top of the slate before setting down the slate pen in a cloth. He then left the room. I hugged the slate with one arm and waved Otto goodbye with the biggest smile of my life before dropping my gaze back onto the slate. The best way to explain it was to call it a mini chalkboard about the size of an A4 piece of paper. A dark thin stone set into a wooden frame. Both sides could be written on, and one of them had lines for practicing letters on. The slate pen was a writing tool specifically for slates, and though I could tell it was a thin stone from a touch, it looked entirely like a thin piece of chalk. A somewhat dirty cloth was a way to clear off the slate. It would probably do a good job, given how the letters Otto wrote got a little blurry from me tugging the slate. My heart's beating so fast. I put the slate onto the table and held the pen. Just gripping the slate pen like a pencil made my heart race. I started off by copying Otto's letters, none of which I recognized at all. I was so nervous writing the first letter of my second life that they all ended up twisted and shaky. If I were in Japan, I likely would have shaken my head and wiped them away immediately to try again. But it had been so long since I had seen letters that I couldn't take my eyes off them. I was so happy. Oh, mine. She's so adorable. I took a deep breath, exhaled, wiped the letters away with the cloth next to the slate, and tried again. Things went a lot better the second time. I wrote my name, erased it, wrote it again, erased it. When I got bored of this, I wrote little poems and song lyrics in Japanese, then erased them, then wrote them, then erased them. This is bliss. I never would have thought that writing letters could make me so happy. Despite being near the furnace, the waiting room was so drafty that after spending hours playing with the slate and waiting for my family, I caught a cold in record time and ended up in bed with a fever. You still have a fever, mine, so stay in bed. No getting out. Okay. The parents busily walked around in and out of the house, so they carried out vegetables into the winter storeroom. Julie was in the kitchen making jam out of fruit and honey that she had gathered herself. In this world, all it took was a sweet scent drifting through my home to make me happy. While they were in the middle of stashing away beer and the prepared pig, Julie brought me my soup lunch. I put aside my stone slate and took the whole tray from her. Sorry, Julie. Seriously, this is a real pain. Oh, what? Didn't you promise not to say that? I never promised that. I mean, okay, you didn't promise that, but isn't it still like an unspoken promise? While everyone else was exhausting themselves praying for wearing, I was lying in bed and playing around with the slate Otto gave me, practicing my name and having fun writing in Japanese. But I really wanted a book that would preserve writing permanently. If writing some letters was all it took to get me this happy, I figured reading a book would make me absolutely ecstatic. I needed to hurry up and get healthy again so I could make paper. Beaten by ancient Egyptians. Tiny bits of snow began to fall here and there right as we were on the verge of finishing our preparations. Winter was coming for real. During winter, our neighborhood would end up snowed in, and we'd generally spend all our time inside the house, outside of especially sunny days. I normally spent all my time inside anyway, like the shut-in I was, so that wasn't really a problem for me. But there were no books in this world. Will I survive as a shut-in without my books around me? Blizzards often occurred when snow began falling, so we needed to keep our windows and doors shut tight for warmth. We then stuffed somewhat thick cloths into any cracks to block as much wind as possible. So dark. It's a blizzard, what did you expect? It caught me off guard that the only sources of light in our locked-up house was the furnace and our candles. It was the first time I'd ever been inside a completely dark room in the middle of the day. It hurt to live without electricity. Even back in my Irano days, I had my phone and flashlights when typhoons knocked out the power, and usually got fixed by the next day. Won't we all get depressed spending weeks in the dark like this? Hey, Mom, is everyone's house this dark? I believe those with a decent amount of spare money tend to have several lamps around their house to light things up, but we only have one. What? We have a lamp and we aren't using it? I figured that was best to use any light source we had, but Mom just sighed and shook her head. We try to avoid using the lamp since we need to be frugal with oil. You wouldn't want to run out of candles if the winter drags on, would you? There was no argument against being frugal. Even my mom back in Japan did all sorts of things in the name of saving money. She would unplug the TV from the wall to save on the electricity bill, and yet fall asleep with it still on. She'd cut off the water when brushing her teeth to save on water, but leave it on when washing dishes. In other words, my mom taught me the importance of self-satisfaction. I decided to take after my mother's frugal ways and see if I could finagle a way to get the room a little brighter. What are you doing, mine? I think this might make the room a little brighter. With a 3-sided mirror magnification properties in mind, I polished my dad's old metal gauntlets that he apparently used in a past war and lined them up next to the candle. Stop it, mine. It's harder to see now. They both immediately shot me down. Unfortunately, the gauntlets weren't flat slabs of metal, and the surface wasn't exactly the smoothest. The light reflected in all sorts of directions and shined in their eyes, making it harder to see their hands. It didn't work. I wonder if there's something else I can use, like a mirror. I would appreciate it if you would stop wasting our time. Mom shot me down with a firm tone, so I gave up on my light-reflecting strategy. But still, having diminished eyesight didn't feel that great, regardless of whether or not I had any books to read. So I took up camp right next to the warm furnace. Not long after that, Mom began setting up her loom near me. It wasn't a large machine like those I had seen in Japan. It was something a lot more fundamental. I had been wondering how one could weave cloth in a house this small, but it seems there were looms small enough to do the job. Tuli, since your baptism's coming up, there's a lot I need to teach you, said Mom before beginning to teach Tuli all she needed to know about weaving. Tuli took a spool of thread in hand, looking deadly serious. She put the thread here, then prepared the weft. You weave the thread like this. Using the thread she had dyed in the fall for this purpose, she started weaving the cloth. She wove the cloth, sewed it into clothing, and embroidered it. While she was at it, she prepared next year's thread from the wool she had bought. We only ever bought the base materials. No new cloths were sold where we lived, and even cloth was too expensive for most commoners to buy. That's right, just like that. You've got a knack for this, Tuli. Mine, would you like to try too? They say that no beauty doesn't know how to sew. What? Beauty? That's right, creating clothes for your family is important both practically and to show off to the neighbors. You can't be a true beauty if you're not good at sewing and cooking. I'm definitely not going to grow up into a beauty then. And I mean, I can understand all that being important for a good wife, but what do cooking and sewing have to do with being beautiful? I was used to clothes just being something you bought at the store. Go to the store and you'd be surrounded by clothes with all sorts of varying designs. I never was very interested in them, just wearing whatever I thought would get me through something without getting yelled at. But even so, my closet ended up packed with clothes. At the very least, I never worn hand-me-downs that had to be sewed up. Sewing was just something I did a few times in school, and those times I just used an electric sewing machine to finish in no time. The best I could do with needles was reattach a fallen button. To say it outright, expecting me to consider making thread, weaving cloth, and sewing clothes for the family over winter at some important thing was just asking too much. I could say with confidence that I would never ever care that much about it. I'd never feel motivated to do it. Though I would sew until my hands fell off if I could use the cloth as parchment. Yeah, if you could, I'm sure you would do it. You don't want to join mine? Maybe next time. Tuli wanted me to join, but I really just did not want to sew anything. Mom was teaching Tuli since she wanted to become an apprentice seamstress, but in my case, I liked the height, hand size, and of course, motivation. Teaching me would be a waste of time. Okay, Mom, please make my special dress. I'll make baskets. Certainly, leave it to your mother. I'll make you the prettiest, most wonderful dress you've ever seen. Mom, confident in her sewing skills, spoke with eager enthusiasm. Every season, all children turning 7 gathered in at the temple wearing their best clothing. It was the perfect opportunity for a mother to show off her talent. In some ways, it was like a competition for mothers. My own mom began preparing the warp with a smile on her face, using thread much thinner than what Tuli had been practicing with. That thread looks pretty thin. Mom gave me a conflicted smile as I thought, Hang on. Thought about how long it would take to make cloth with that thread. Well, her baptism is in the summer. Can you imagine how hot it would be without thin clothing? You're making her dress in the winter, even though her baptism is in the summer. Won't she get bigger by then? There was a lot more food and time to play around in the summer, so I figured most kids would grow a lot during it. What would happen if she grew too much and the dress ended up too small for her? I can make little changes to it, so that won't be a problem. My main worry is that you're much smaller than her, mine. You might not be able to wear the same dress. Fixing it that much will be quite the ordeal. I wonder what I'll do next year. Oof, that does sound rough. Good luck, Mom. Mom resumed weaving the cloth using the thin thread, which looked harder to work with than the wool thread they made earlier. Tuli began making baskets to sell. Since my eyes had adjusted well enough to the dark, I decided to start making my own faux potpourri as my first giant step to accomplishing my dreams. If I could just weave these plant fibers together, I'll definitely end up with something like paper. I won't lose to ancient Egyptians. Let's do this. I put the fibers on the table and thought back to the coasters I had been forced to make back in my Irano days. First, I would try to make a piece of paper about the size of a postcard. I got to work vertically and horizontally, weaving the fibers that were much thinner than the thread Mom was sewing with. I liked money, skill, and age. This was a duel I had to win with guts, determination, and more guts. They're all so thin I can barely tell them apart. Fiddle, 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 fiddle. I must stop. Fiddle, 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 fiddle. The fibers were so thin it wasn't easy to fix any mistake I made. It all just fell apart. Frustrated, I continued my duel with the thin fibers, and eventually Tuli stopped making her basket to peer over my shoulder. Hey, mine, what are you doing? Making faux potpourris. Tuli looked back and forth between me and my hand. It was written all over her face that she hadn't understood what I had just said. You can't tell by looking? I haven't even finished a 1-inch wide square yet, so that's fair. Not even I can tell if this is actually going to end up as good faux paper is. Mom continued to weed the cloth, looked at me fiddling with the plant fibers inside. Fiddle, 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 fiddle. Mind if you have the time to play around, help Thule make baskets instead. Maybe when I'm not busy. I wasn't playing around and I didn't have the time to help Thule. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I was the busiest I have ever been since starting my life as mine. I made another mistake, all because Mom called out to me. Jeez. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Mine, seriously, what are you doing? I told you I'm making faux papyrus. I didn't have the mental leeway to respond gently to Thule's question, so my tone ended up a little sharp as I focused everything on fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. I didn't hate working with my hands, and I wasn't doing this because I wanted to. I just had to stay determined and keep going. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Mine, it's not getting any bigger. I know that. Thule's comment served as a spark that finally made me yell in frustration. It took me a whole day just to get to the size of a fingertip. Please understand how I must have felt. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. The next day I relied on determination as well. Just keep going, I told myself as I wove the fibers together. I can't let Thule's comments bother me. What's that even supposed to be? I can't let them bother me. I can't let them bother me. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. God, it's coming apart. I just have to keep going. My heart will break if I try fixing it. Fiddle, fiddle, fiddle. Hey, mine. That's it. I can't do it, okay? Ancient Egyptians, you win. I lose. Mentally and emotionally exhausted, I clenched a fist around my faux papyrus and yelled at in frustration. The faux papyrus had ended up about the size of a tiny note card. I had no idea how many days it would take if I was to try weaving the fibers into the size of an actual piece of paper, while keeping them tight enough to actually write on. Naturally, it would be impossible for me to make enough faux papyrus to bind into a book at that rate. You could tell just by touching my card-sized faux papyrus that I had lost patience with it midway through. The center was tightly woven, but the closer you got to the outside, the more frayed it was. No way would it have ended up as paper I could write on. At best, they would be a somewhat messy coaster. Not even good enough to write memos on. I failed. My papyrus plan failed so hard. The challenge involved in getting the materials, the difficulty of the creation process, and the overall time investment were just too great for faux papyrus to be mass-produced. Even if I finished that sheet of faux papyrus, it wouldn't lead to me making a book. Be quiet, mind. If you have the time to play with plants, weave some baskets. Baskets won't turn into books. I don't know what you're talking about, but you failed, didn't you? Just start making baskets. Already. Mom was so mad that I gave up and started weaving baskets. It was a lot simpler to weave the baskets together than the super thin paper plants. Thule, I'll help you make baskets. Would you mind sharing your stuff? Here, I'll teach you. Thule offered to help with a smile while gathering materials for me, but I just took them and shook my head. It's okay, I already know how. What? Watching Thule blink in confusion out of the corner of my eye, I started weaving a basket. I lined up the bamboo-esque flat piece of wood and delicately wove them together, making a tight basket with no gaps. I cannot talk today. This was really perfect timing for me since I had been wanting a sort of takeout bag for a while. I decided to put my all into making the basket, partially to blow off steam after failing so hard with papyrus. After making a solid bottom, I calculated how to make the outside of the basket have a pretty design before starting to weave the rest of it. I kept weaving the pieces of wood, taking care not to hurt my hands until the basket was done. It took me 5 whole days just to make a tiny chunk of faux papyrus, but I finished my tote bag within a day. Yeah, that's a lot easier to work with, especially if you know how to do it. That was pretty good considering how clumsy my tiny child hands were. That's amazing, Mine. I didn't know you were a natural at this. Maybe you should try to be an apprentice carpenter. What? That's a little... Mom's eyes beamed with joy, excited to see that her generally useless daughter had unexpected talent. But I had no intention of becoming an apprentice carpenter. I would work at a bookstore, library, or nowhere at all. Though it was a little problem that books were so rare that there were no bookstores or libraries to hire me. Why are you so good at this, Mine? Thule compared her baskets with mine and slumped her shoulders, depressed at how much worse hers were. Don't worry about it, Thule. You just need to learn how to tighten the gaps and plan ahead to make patterns. I mean, the real difference here is just how much experience we have. Back in my Irano days, I had gotten wrapped up in my mom's arts and crafts kick when she folded newspaper advertisements and made baskets out of them. I had never expected that experience to be useful to me, but, well, you never know where life will take you. I can't believe you're better than me, Mine. Oh no, looks like I really hurt Thule's older sister pride. Right. Mrs. Gerda taught me while she babysat me. I've been doing this all the time while you're out in the forest. You did a lot of other things while I made baskets, so you're still better than me at almost everything. Really? I didn't have much experience with children, so I wasn't sure how to put her back in a good mood. I did my best to make it an excuse for why I was so good, but honestly I wasn't even sure what I was trying to say myself. Oh, okay, that's right. I wasn't sure what part of her that convinced her, but Tuli looked a little relieved. Okay, then I'll make lots of baskets over the winter and get better than you mine. Uh-huh, good luck, Tuli. I let out a sigh of relief, glad to see Tuli feeling better. It would be a lot harder for me to survive here without Tuli's help. If left on my own, I would be helpless. I'm so glad I cheered her up. Oh, Tuli, you should force it into place a little more. It would look better that way. Well, it's not like I'm that happy about being good at making baskets. I just want books. I watched Tuli's basket weaving and gave her advice while glancing at my failed faux papyrus. If papyrus won't work, what should I try making next? Throughout the winter, I thought about what to do next while continuously weaving baskets next to Tuli. Egypt's no good. It's way too hard for a kid like me. What should I do if Egypt won't work? Well, thinking about it like a textbook, you usually study Mesopotamian culture before Egyptian culture. Okay, that's it! Cuneiform. It's time for clay tablets. Long live Mesopotamian culture! I remember that even after the flames of war and arson, their clay tablets managed to survive. I'll make clay tablets, carve letters into them, cook them in a furnace, and that might just be that. Plus, making tablets out of clay will be like a kid playing with mud. The adults won't suspect a thing. It's settled. That's what I want to do. Once the snow melts and spring comes, I'm making clay tablets. Okay, let me check. Dang, how do I get through so many pages? It's nuts. Okay, I'm gonna have to end this off here. I'll see you guys next time.